Today we're here to watch an interview with Haley Robson, a survivor from being a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. Her story is dark, and the longer we listen, the more awful things you're going to hear, not only about her life and her abuse that she endured by Jeffrey Epstein, but everything that happened following. Because Jeffrey Epstein doesn't just ruin your life when you're there with him, he ruins it for years beyond. This is a super disturbing story, and there's going to be a lot of moments where you just feel for Haley. This is a long video, so make sure you have yourself a drink. For me, I'm drinking my coffee, and let me know what's in your cup. Thank you for subscribing. Now, let's dive into the video.
All right, Haley. Haley, where'd you grow up? Where are you from originally?
Miami, Florida. I grew up in Miami, Florida. North Dade.
Tell me about your family.
Ooh, I had two siblings, both older sisters. My father was a homicide and robbery detective. He joined the force in the 80s when the cocaine cowboys were at its peak. So I had a lot of interesting stories growing up with my dad. My mom was in the banking industry, and then she quit to enter hospitality bartending. And we were, for the most part, well-adjusted children, big family, big holiday celebrations. We were into equestrian. We did dance, gymnastics, swim team. We were busy. My parents kept us busy for the most part.
Sounds like a solid family.
You would think. Yeah, it was, there were some dark parts too, though. I had two older siblings, and watching my older sister, I think she was 14, I think I was right around 8, and my parents were having behavioral issues with her. She was my half-sister. I didn't find that out until I was 18.
Now, let's be honest. All families have their secrets. What you see when you look at a family isn't exactly what that family is like when no one is around. Whether those secrets are really dark and terrible or just, little white secrets that people don't know because you're allowed to have your own privacy, that's the reality. When you see a family out in the open, that's not exactly how that family functions when they are home behind closed doors. It's just worth noting because it was brought up here, and I figured that we wanted to kind of set the table.
And there were behavioral issues with her growing up, acting out when she was 14, not coming home, sneaking through the window. And I remember as a child, I was in elementary school. I think I was right around 8 or 9. And I would go to my friend's house down the street in Miami, and I would play with her after school or, go over for dinner. And her brother would walk me home at night to my house. I was never allowed to walk home alone. And my sister's belongings and her clothes would be scattered all over our front yard with garbage bags. And that's when I learned that she was forced to go live with my grandmother because my parents could not get her under control. There was just a lot of issues, and I would be getting up for school in the morning with my middle sister, who I shared the same school with, and my mom and my 14-year-old sister, half-sister, would be in the bathroom fist-fighting, throwing down, because she was making us late for school or she wasn't getting ready on time. And that's, I think, where my childhood trauma started. Watching that kind of violence at 8 years old, 9 years old with your mom and your sister. I mean, it's maybe not horrifying in the moment, but when you grow up and become your own mom and you become a mother, it's horrifying.
This is a reminder to all of us as parents, myself included, that we always need to be mindful of what our children see, especially when they're young. She just mentioned that 8 or 9 years old, it may not be the biggest thing in the moment, but those memories and the thoughts that you have from those memories, they impact you as you're growing into an adult, starting a family of your own. So we need to always remember that everything that we do with our children impacts them later on in life. So let's try our best as parents to give our children the most positive experiences, the positive role models that they deserve, so that they can have an easier time when they're in our shoes being a parent.
It changes your perspective a little bit on family. And then my dad, my dad being a homicide and robbery detective, that was, he was never home. He was always on call. A lot of birthday parties and social events that he would miss out, which, as a child, you don't understand. But again, when you become an adult, you start to understand. You have bills to pay. You have children to feed. You have money that you need to make, a mortgage to pay. So I never had resentment. As I got older, I understood that concept. But we moved out of Miami due to the fact that my father was running into people that he was putting in jail. And then our house got broken into. That was when my father and mother decided that we needed to move and that he could no longer be a police officer in Miami with us in the same area, knowing that he's running into these perpetrators. And I'm talking like dirty cartel, like bad people. And then our house got broken into. So we moved, and we had a house built in Loxahatchee, which is out west in West Palm Beach, Royal Palm Beach area. I was 12 or 13 when we moved. Rode equestrian. But there was such a disconnect for me when I moved, because going from Miami, where all my friends were biracial, different economic status, different races intertwined, and then coming to Loxahatchee, where when I went to high school, I got made fun of a lot because I didn't look like a white girl. I had black curly hair, I looked Italian, I looked European, and I got teased a lot for the way I looked. And high school was hard. And I had my 2 older sisters, and high school wasn't good for me. It was where a lot of my sexual abuse started. I had a friend in middle school and in high school, and that was the first time I was sexually assaulted. I would go over to her house to sleep over, and her 20-year-old brother would come in and wake me up at night. And when you're 13, you don't really understand the full, you think it's a crush, oh, I'm 13, I have a crush on my friend's brother. And the next thing you know, he wants to have sex with you, or he wants to hook up with you. You're 13, And we never, it never got to that length. And then it was to the point where I would sleep over and she would have to lock her door. And her mom was buying us alcohol. And when we would come to her house, her brothers would give us weed. So it was like the party house. I would go over there and we would have alcohol, we would have marijuana. It was not a lot of guidance in her house.
You should really know where your kids are going. It's not only the friend that they're going to hang out with, but also the siblings, the parents. I feel like this is a parenting session right now, but that's just how we're getting into the initial start of Haley's story here. She's giving us that context so we can understand her upbringing. And now remember, she did just move to Palm Beach, which is, putting us a little bit closer to the story that we already know.
And eventually I stopped sleeping over. It just got really uncomfortable and awkward. My freshman year of high school, my sophomore year of high school, I had pretty good grades. I was pretty solid in what I wanted to do with life. And I was an equestrian rider. I competed. I had a thoroughbred and a quarter horse. And my dad and I were training my quarter horse and breaking her in together. It was a father-daughter probably one of the happiest memories of my dad. And then that all changed because I was hanging out with people I shouldn't be hanging out with. Having older siblings, sometimes you run with an older crowd. And we were going to clubs at 15. The girls that I went to school with that I considered friends. We were all going to nightclubs. We were all drinking. We were getting in. And at 15, I was at a friend's house. Her aunt was leaving for the weekend, and we had to stay at her house to watch the horses and take care of the barn and the house. And we went out that night, and we ended up having people come back to the house. And I was raped. And I asked him to stop. And he looked at me and said, "Let me just get my nut and be over quick." And I just remember laying in the bed, and I turned my head to the left, and I just looked at the door, and I just started crying. I don't even think we were fully finished, and his friend walked in. And his friend started laughing at me. Because I was and he ripped me, so I was bleeding. And that was my first experience with a man ever. I woke up the next morning extremely sore. I obviously was aware of what happened. I just wasn't aware of the details. So I called him that morning and asked him if, did you at least wear, did you at least have enough decency to wear it? And he laughed at me and asked me if I wanted a relationship with him. And that was the first experience I ever had with a man, pretty much. So I was everything. It ruined everything for me. And about 6 months later, I was heavy into drugs at that point. I was doing cocaine, a lot of Xanax. I was drinking a lot. And I was out of control because I had all this trauma, all these things that were happening around me and to me, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I in my household, we didn't talk about things like that. It was very taboo. We don't discuss things like that. It was very much sweeping everything under the rug and pretending like everything was fine. I came home one night from a binge. I think I was gone for 2 or 3 days. And my mom and dad had been sitting at the dining room table, and they called me over, and my sisters were out of the house. And they sat me down and told me, you're living a fast life. The direction of your life is not good. And if you don't stop, something horrific is going to happen to you. And I just remember saying to my parents, it already did. And I hate you guys for it. And there were some things that happened after that with my parents. My dad was very upset. He felt very disrespected. But they put me in therapy. Never asked me what happened. They just put me in therapy. And I was crazy for a long time. I know this is confusing. I was in therapy while being abused by Jeffrey. Yeah, if you can believe that.
Wow.
And my therapist had told my mom, "Your daughter is displaying severe signs of sexual abuse and assault." But HIPAA, the way it works is because I was her patient, there was only so much information she could give, even though she was my parent. So nobody knew what I was going through or to the degree or magnitude of what was happening to me because I wasn't opening up. I was scared. And when I met Jeffrey, I thought he would make it all go away. And I met Jeffrey when I was 16. I had just turned 16 years old. I was recruited at the Canopy, which was a beach resort on Singer Island, by a classmate. She was the same age as me, and she recruited me.
So we don't often hear that. Typically, we hear the name Ghislaine Maxwell come into play at a moment like this. But here, it was a classmate. So someone that had already been previously recruited by Epstein is now doing the recruiting for Epstein.
And gave me his number. And within that week, I picked her up. I picked up Tony Figueroa, who was an adult male. And all three of us drove together to Jeffrey's mansion, and they told me it would just be a massage, an easy $200. And that's not what took place upstairs.
Remember, when Epstein would have girls recruit other girls, not Ghislaine Maxwell, but other victims recruiting new potential victims, they were getting paid a certain amount of money for recruiting new people as well. So her friend made money for bringing her into Jeffrey Epstein to be another new victim. So Haley was a paycheck for her friend.
I was brought upstairs, and Jeffrey came out in a white bath towel, and he wasn't wearing anything else, just the white bath towel, and there was a massage table set up. And it was like a room within a room. So it was the master bedroom, and then you would walk into the bathroom, but it wasn't just a bathroom. It was a steam room, a sauna, a shower. It was like a room within a room. And when Jeffrey came out in his towel, it started off pretty innocent. You know, I had my clothes on. He was laying on his stomach with the towel on, so I was just rubbing his back. And he flipped over, and it became something completely different. And he grabbed me on the backside so firmly that it like pushed me into the table to get closer to him. And at this point, he had asked me to take off my skirt and my shirt, so I was just in my. And that's when he started to touch me in places, and he brought out sex toys, and I was completely uncomfortable with that. And the look on his face of disappointment, it was like being bullied or being berated because you didn't want to do the drugs. And in that hour, I was abused for that entire hour. And then he forced me to do things to him as he and finished himself. And in that room, he looked at me and said, well, you're going to come back when I call you, or you're going to bring a friend. And he gave me that ultimatum. And that's what it was. And as a 16-year-old, you can imagine how terrifying that must be for anybody after already going through a horrific sexual assault. I made a decision out of survival, and I stand by that choice. Do I regret it? Yes. Do I wish that I could have been an adult in that moment? Do I wish that I could have had somebody guide me? Do I wish that somebody would have came in and ran and opened that door and grabbed me? Absolutely. But all I had was me. I had to make a decision.
You were 16?
I was 16. I wanted to get out. And I was in his orbit for 2 years after that.
Wow.
And it was horrifying. When I turned 18, after being by Jeffrey for 2 years, I decided that it was time that I move. Because legally at 18, you can move. You have that option. So when I turned 18 years old, I decided to move to Orlando, Florida. So shortly after Jeffrey, I moved. And I tried to start a new life. And I tried to start a new chapter.
How often were you seeing Jeffrey?
I think I went to his house maybe between 24 and 35 times through those 2 years. So maybe once a month. You know what I mean? It wasn't, maybe once or twice a month. I wasn't as frequent as most people think I was. And I brought, I think, 8 to 10 girls. But I went to his house more than once with those girls.
So she actually was recruiting other girls as well.
So I was a recurring customer, I guess, or a victim, I guess you could say. But the girls had come with me more than once. And when you did something horrific, or if you brought someone to Jeffrey that he didn't like, you would know about it because he would scold you for it. And then he would say to you, I told you the younger the better. Do not bring me this girl anymore. Don't ever bring her back to my house. I had him say that to me 3 times. He reprimanded me. And I didn't like the way it made me feel. I didn't like being in his presence. I just wanted out of West Palm. So I moved. And I moved to Orlando, Florida. I was an exotic dancer for quite some time, couple years. I fell in love. I was 19 and I met somebody. And it was the first time in my life that a man didn't force me to have sex. It was the first time a man didn't expect me to have sex. It was literally a man who wanted nothing from me but just to be in my presence. And he was murdered in 2006. And that was probably one of the most horrific experiences of my life. To have such bad experiences with men, and then to meet somebody that instead of wanting to take from you, they just wanted to be there for you. And to have that kind of friendship and to be able to sit in silence with a man and for him to understand what you've been through without questioning you, without asking you, but to just be there. It was something I had never experienced before in my life with anybody of the opposite sex. So I took his death extremely hard, but it was a sobering moment for me. It was a very sobering moment for me because at that point I decided to get off drugs and to try to clean up my act, to actually make a solid attempt at okay, girl, you got this. We can do this. We have to get ourselves together. And that night he was murdered. My mom and my aunt came and picked me up. And it changed my life forever because that same week, everything hit the press with Jeffrey Epstein. And my name was tarnished and dragged through the mud. And so when I say I lost everything, I lost everything and everyone. I lost my family that day. I lost my boy. I lost a lot. But looking back in hindsight, when you become an adult, I realized that there was nothing wrong with me. I wasn't the problem. I just needed somebody to sit down and listen and hear me and to see me and to believe me. I was called crazy. I was called a lot of things when I came out about Jeffrey, and I was not lying. I was not crazy at all. And it's a very re-traumatizing thing to go through when you're a child trying to balance life, school, trauma. And then, by the time I graduated high school, I think I was 18, there was nobody left in my house. My sisters had been moved out. So it was just me. There was nobody to really look after me or protect me. Until my mom, I think at 16 or 17, my mom gave up her job to be stay-at-home. But it was too late. I had already been trafficked. And people think that trafficking means that you're sitting in a cell block or you're sitting in a garage with handcuffs on and you're not allowed to go anywhere and you don't see daylight. And it's such a huge misconception of what trafficking is. And fast forward to bringing us today and seeing how everything has moved through the media and has been outed so publicly, I think people, including the public, often forget that while everybody's reading these files, and gossiping about the girls instead of trying to find justice for the girls. We're seeing this in real time, the same time that everybody else is seeing this and reading this material. We did not get a heads up. We got nothing. So it's re-traumatizing even more. I never in my wildest life imagined that there would be these kinds of heinous crimes or material in these files. When I stood at the Capitol and I advocated to release files and that I wanted to be transparent because that is what's best for America, for the people, for the public, for everybody. It needs to be out there so we can move past it. What I wasn't expecting was children being sacrificed, or the adults that were also contributing to the abuse of minor children. I mean, how do you recover from that? How does America recover from that? You can't fix it. It's out there. And I think in retrospect, if we knew that this is the kind of salacious material that was in the files, maybe decisions would have been slightly differently in how we handled it. But because Epstein is the first huge public pedophile that has been so public, nobody knew how to handle us, the victims. Nobody knew how to cope or how to help us. This was a learning curve for everybody, for the victims, the police department, the government. And it's been horrendous. It's been ugly. It's been re-traumatizing. And when you open those files and you're seeing my name pop up or the names of other girls that have also too been out, we're real people. We're real people with real trauma. This isn't just a Netflix documentary. This was our life that we lived as children. And I can't fathom staying quiet or staying silent. And I can't understand how a government can sit back for whatever reason, whether it's CIA, intelligence, or for whatever reason. Why are we sacrificing the children of America and around the world for our government affairs to keep everybody in line? Why is that a thing?
I think we know the answer. And I think the answer is because the government, the high and powerful and mighty and rich, are the ones that are deeply in bed in this whole crime circle. I think that's the true answer here. And they're more looking out for themselves and their network than the victims. I honestly don't think that they care very much about the victims. Not everyone, but the ones that are involved in all these crimes, I don't think they care about the victims. And I think that they'll do almost anything to keep it quiet.
That should never be a thing, whether it's for government, whether it's for experiments, nothing. You never sacrifice children. That's not what we stand for as human beings. And seeing all of this unfold has been devastating. But we lived it and we survived it. And the children in all of this that came from broken homes, that came from poverty, that came from maybe parents that had drug addiction, we are the outcome of that. We are what is left of Epstein. And in some capacity, when you take those files and you take the fragments that you received, nobody has been exonerated. Nobody should be getting off. Everybody should be investigated.
Yeah.
I was a 16-year-old victim that was recruited and brought into this. And yet in Florida, during the 2009 investigation, I was brought in for a grand jury. I had to testify in front of a grand jury. because the world thought I was a co-conspirator. So when I did this and I went in front of the grand jury, I was not indicted because I'm not a co-conspirator, I'm a victim. And that was proven in the system, that was proven in courts. That's my testimony. My testimony of all the abuse and trauma that Jeffrey has put me through. But why?
She was probably looked at as a co-conspirator because she was bringing other girls to Jeffrey Epstein as well. She was doing some of the recruiting, and probably some of the other girls in their testimonies, or maybe even just, calling out that she was someone that brought them to Jeffrey Epstein. So I'm assuming that's why she was looked at as a co-conspirator.
Why was no one else brought in for a grand jury? There were adults that were actively abusing us. There were co-conspirators that were actively abusing us. Nobody had to go to that length to prove they're innocent, but the child in all of this. It always comes back to the house you grew up in, the home that you were raised in. In 2023, I believe, I'm a full-grown adult. And I was physically attacked by my sister. And it's public record. And the words will never not resonate with me when things like, I wish you would have gotten, I wish you were dead, the things that come out of people's mouths because they can't understand the trauma, they can't understand the situation. The parents out there that have children that want to protect the children, they have to start educating themselves and getting in front of this and having honest conversations. We all, unfortunately, the abuse of our story in Florida with the children is that we were to bring other friends into this trafficking ring. That was the abuse. That was something that in 2023, when DeSantis had the press conference in Florida, he made all the files on a state level public. And the first thing the judge said was, this is the most heinous crimes I have seen against children. And the thing with Jeffrey Epstein, and I will never forget hearing this on Tucker Carlson, he was talking about what is the attraction to 14 and 15-year-old girls with braces and not fully developed. Mm-hmm. And he said, Jeffrey wanted to destroy the innocence out of children. It was a power that he wanted from children. And when you think about that, there is nothing more sinister than somebody that wants to break down a child for their own personal gain. But looking back on everything and the way that this whole case has been handled in Florida with all of the corruption, we may have some of the files, but the damage has been done to the credibility of the government. The damage has been done to the credibility and integrity of the entire case. Because no matter what documents now are released, it's already been proven that there's been damage done to those documents. So at what point as a nation do we stand up and do we say to each other, this is non-political? This is about the direction of our country and the direction that our government is taking us in. It's not a good direction. When you start gambling and sacrificing the children that you're supposed to be protecting, it stops becoming a safe place. And without children, without us protecting children, whether our own or others, where does the future lie? We're just creating more damaged people and then making it impossible for them to get therapy? It's a vicious cycle, it sounds like. But this story of Jeffrey Epstein is not just about pedophilia. This is about a two-tiered mechanical system designed by man in power to hold that power, to sustain that power over the constituents that he depends on, the government depends on. And we as a nation need to understand that we put these people in power, and we have the power to take that away from them. And unfortunately, with the children in this case and with the young women in this case, we have all been so traumatized, not just with our home lives, but with our own country and our own government. So release the files, unredacted, and let every person in this country and around the world see how far we've gone away from God.
She's right. We do put these people in power. As Americans, we vote to put people in power that we feel would be good in that office. I don't know, especially in current days, if we have as much power to take them out of power. I think that that's becoming increasingly difficult. And because of that, they're kind of getting this invincibility. Once in power, it's very difficult to remove that power. And that's unfortunate.
It's dangerous.
It's insane that we're accepting that the files were released, but only some of them, and parts are blocked out, and it's like, how is that acceptable?
It's not acceptable, and they're breaking the law by their own admission into signing in the bill for the Transparency Act that Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna passed. And the problem that we're having is there's people in power that are not being held accountable from the top. And until we hold them accountable, until we hold them responsible and force them to come in and testify and to have open investigations to decide who is involved and who is not, it will never be anything more than a story about a billionaire pedophile who had an island. And it seems as though if we don't come together and try to make changes for our country, this is going to be a repeat pattern. It's going to happen again. And the fact that they're redacting all of these perpetrators, but not redacting the victims, that is another assault on not just the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. That is a war, an act of war on every survivor, every child, woman, and man that have come forward to talk about their own abuse. You can't intimidate us, not with your smear campaigns, not with your threats, not with your lack of empathy. This will come out. It may take 10 years, it may take another 20 years, we don't know. And like I said, with the credibility of this entire investigation and the entire case starting from 2009 back in Florida, we may never get the full truth because it's already been compromised.
You know, release the files. The files have come out. We're, in a way, accepting that the files came out in the form that they did. Redacted, fully redacted. Actually, almost fully redacted because they didn't redact the victims. And when you think about that, we're sitting here and we're kind of accepting that it's redacted. Okay, yeah, we want the full files, but like, it's kind of being accepted that every document that you see has black smears throughout it and we just can't see what's actually there. All the incriminating details are gone. So we're basically playing with a puzzle, trying to put everything together. And because the government did such a poor job of redacting, we're able to put puzzle pieces together. But that's messed up. Why are we accepting that the victims' names are there for everyone to see? These people that already endured so much abuse, they're now in the public eye. But the people that did the are being protected. It is literally right here in front of us. And I know that we're not truly accepting of it, but it's happening. And not much is changing to have these unredacted files actually come out. And you could see in Haley's voice and how she's speaking right now, she's angry. She's upset. She's not going to give up. She's not going to be intimidated. And I've been hearing very similar from many other women that were victims in their interviews. We actually did an interview with another victim just a few days ago. I'll be linking that probably at the end of this video if you want to have a watch. But some of the similarities are quite interesting on how they're handling things right now. And I think a lot of that is because they have one another for support. They're finding their sisters, as some of them have said, that completely understand what they went through the way that no other people could.
And that is the reality.
Yeah, it's really embarrassing.
For our country, absolutely. I take a look at Europe, my Northern Europe. I love my Nordic countries up there. I've done a lot of media with them, and I've had a lot of conversations. The world is laughing at us. We are ran by we're run by pedophiles.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way you will ever convince me that a group of 40 young girls could come forward with the same story and that the country actually believes that we were fabricated or that we were a Democrat hoax. You can't fake that kind of it doesn't happen.
It's just absolutely ridiculous.
What do you think people misunderstand about the survivors?
Oh, there's a lot. I don't even know where to unpack. One thing that I feel like nobody ever touches on this, and I really need people to understand this, to understand the scope and the magnitude. Not everybody was trafficked. A lot of the girls in Florida were abused by Jeffrey. Some were trafficked, majority were not. New Mexico, that we don't talk enough about. I would like to know more about New Mexico, but from my understanding, there's been a lot of experiments and a lot more dark sacrifices and horrific crimes against humanity. That needs to be investigated. But then you see that they just stopped, the DOJ is demanding them to stop the investigations. And it's like, here we are again, met with more resistance. And I think the writing's on the wall. I mean, there's only one reason why somebody wouldn't want to investigate possible crimes against children at a ranch. And, you know, that's huge. And I think that speaks volumes. And other countries look at that like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And it is embarrassing. But it's interesting that geographically, when you look at Florida, New York, and New Mexico, all the abuse was different. The older girls that were models, mostly from my knowledge, were more trafficked out to other individuals and corporations. And yet the children in Florida, majority of us, were kept for Jeffrey. And then New Mexico has kind of been the silent factor in all this, hasn't it? Until recently with the files. And so that's something that the public needs to understand, is that the use was different geographically. And I know that may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people. It doesn't make sense with me. But unfortunately, Jeffrey's not, well, I don't want to say unfortunately. I guess it's fortunate that he's not here, but it's also unfortunate because we have so many questions that we would like to have answers to. But also to, you know, with the public is, I understand if you've never been trafficked, if you've never been sexually exploited or abused, or you've never gone through that sort of trauma, it's very hard to understand. And I get that. But get educated. Please educate yourselves. Go talk to people that run coalitions, nonprofits. Research what trafficking is to its core and what exploitation is. You know, I hear a lot of people say, it would never happen to me. You know, that is the first person it happens to, unfortunately, is a person that is so arrogant and ignorant to think it would never touch them. This was in our backyard. Jeffrey was doing this in our backyard. He did it while we were at school. You know, it's a very difficult thing to grasp.
Do you see hope for the situation in the future here?
I'm hopeful because of Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna and their diligence and just their remarkable tenacity. It's incredible to watch. They're not letting this go. And they give me a lot of hope for America in general, and especially for the Epstein files to be released. And it's incredible to watch how this, in the very beginning, seemed to be a partisan issue. But as we're seeing, it's becoming more non-bipartisan as the time is going and more documents are being released. And now you have more Republicans like Mace and Luna that are coming out saying, oh, no, 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 no. We want this released. We want the files out. This needs to be exposed. So I do see a lot more people showing interest and genuine concern for what's in those files. But until those people in the files are brought in front of a grand jury or brought in for questioning and investigations are opened up, I'm going to remain calm and not too over the top with my hope. I'm going to try to be neutral and positive, but realistic.
It's laughable and embarrassing that it's okay to edit or redact these files and release them that way.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting.
And it's deliberate. And that's the part we need to start talking about.
Okay, here's your files, but we're taking out the important parts.
So ironically that you're bringing that up, because I've been probably one of the only survivors that have been very vocal on wanting transparency, to the point of where I've been like, don't redact my name. I don't care. I don't care if it's unredacted. I don't care if it's redacted. I don't give a crap.
Everyone's names seem to be out there anyway.
Well, and that was kind of like, well, there was two reasons for that. My first reason was I've never been protected. Why would you do it now? My name's been public for 23 years. There's no new information on me in that file.
Well, the names they're editing out are really the people in power.
That's the problem we're having, is when I said I didn't care if my name was redacted or not, that was not to signal that we want to redact the perpetrators.
This is exactly what I was saying before. And I actually commend her for not wanting to be redacted. At this point, I think most people know that the victims were actual victims and that they're not lying and that they've been telling the truth the entire time. So being in the documents unredacted, I don't think it does any harm at this point if you were a victim. But obviously, if you were someone that was a criminal and an abuser and all of this, it's I mean, they're touching on what I touched on about 5 minutes ago, and that is that it's embarrassing, laughable, and actually unbelievable that it's going on, and that the redactions are protecting the criminals.
And you know, it's really something to see when Thomas Massie has to get on the phone with the DOJ and say, why is this name redacted? Les Wexner redacted? Really? Are you kidding me? That man was the staple in Jeffrey's life that was, honestly, this would never have been possible without him. Wow. And again, I didn't need the files to know that. The files were to prove to America. I've been knowing that. I don't know if America has dabbled into a Les Wexner on a deeper scope. Go look at Abercrombie and Fitch. Look at the boys they trafficked through the modeling agencies. This is why it's so huge and why the files need to come out, is because this is not just about girls that are underage and not just about children. There are boys in that file. There are boys that are now grown men in that file that have never seen a day in court, that have been shamed into silence because of the stipulation and the horrific conversations circulating homophobia now. And they're scared to come forward, a lot of them. It's like, at what point do we sit back and say, these are the most heinous, egregious crimes against children and men and women that I have ever seen. And it is absolutely unacceptable for any government official to block the perpetrators in this. Ehud Barak. Oh, don't even get me started on him. I don't dig into the names very much because I wasn't trafficked. It wasn't my experience. But when I've heard stories about Virginia's book and Ehud Barak came up, and he was the prime minister, and I'm going to say his name until I'm blue in the face because I don't think there is a more heinous perpetrator in that whole file than Ehud. Not only did he rape these girls and traffic these girls, He physically abused them. What are we doing as a nation? Are we not upset enough? Are we not angry enough? At what point do we take the side of the children? And do we say we have to go to war? It's been the children in all of this that have been going to war and battling things, not just externally, but internally. It's not just the abuse with Jeffrey. It's the trafficking. It's the smear campaigns. It's the threats. There are so many of us that are still in complete fear because even though Jeffrey's dead, what about his accomplices?
I was just going to say his entire network still lives on. And honestly, his entire network are potentially even stronger, more powerful people than he ever was. So the whole Epstein network is still functioning, most likely, and very alive.
And then you have Ghislaine Maxwell. And I've been very outspoken about this with the Democrat female caucus. And I've said this in Congress. Why is she not back in prison? Why haven't we done that yet? You saw the files. America's seen the files. We know that she is more than a co-conspirator. She is a pedophile. She partook in all of this. She aided and abetted Jeffrey's crimes. She partook in the crimes. And honestly, in my opinion, she was more so of the mastermind. And her was just as horrific as Jeffrey's, if not worse. And yet she is in a summer camp. And I have been very vocal about why aren't we investigating who made that deal? Who made that deal? Where did that come from? Trump and his entire administration, you need to come in because as least you can do is explain why you're in the files and why she got a deal. Bring Todd Blanche in. You can't talk me into believing that Todd Blanche went to talk to Ghislaine alone and there wasn't a deal that was made. There have been deals that have been made since the very first day. How many children are you going to bargain until you do the right thing? At what cost? How many more survivors have to die? How many more of us do we have to take our own life for you guys to see this is serious for us? Some of us are drowning in our own shit, hoping that someone throws us a goddamn life preserver, and everybody, including the adults, back then in 2004 when we were being abused, all the way up until 2026 are just sitting back and watching. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for?
If that's not a cry for help, I mean, she can't even keep it together as she's saying that. And the system has been continuously letting down all of the victims and anyone that's involved in trafficking in general since the beginning of time. At the end of the day, it's hard to believe that the system is purposefully letting down all these women.
I applaud Thomas Massey. I applaud Rokana. I could be 60 before I see anybody go to jail for what was done to me.
It's true.
Or to the other girls. That is the reality of this. And every day that we wake up fighting this, people look at us and they say, you're resilient, you're strong.
Crazy thing is, if she's 60 before people go to jail, the majority of the criminals are going to be dead. They were already so much older than all of the victims.
You're courageous. And I look in the mirror every day and all I see is a mother. An overprotective mother who has seen evils in this world that has consumed her, that has taken away stability, trust. It's taken away everything that women are compiled of, love, nurturing. Those things don't get talked enough about in trauma. But when you've endured things like that, it makes the way you interact with other people very difficult. Showing affection, trusting people, being able to go to work. I have a full-time job and I have to work through all of this. You know, those things can be complicated. Those are obstacles that we on a daily basis have to go through. So at the end of all of this, regardless of how long it takes, there's already been collateral damage. The damage has already been done. You can't undo it. You can't fix it. The only thing that can even equate at this point is arresting and investigating every single co-conspirator and perpetrator on that list. That is the only thing that's left to do. And here we are.
It looks like they're all going to just walk away unscathed, while you guys, all the victims, are dealing with death threats and all the crap you guys have to go through.
You know, I do believe that's true, and it's a reality that I try to steer from because I want to be hopeful. I want to wake up tomorrow, and I want to love my life. And I want to believe that there will be an end to this. But, you know, unfortunately, I've also had to be realistic. And what the ending looks like in my mind versus what the ending is going to look like in reality, I have to understand those are two separate things. They're very different. And I have heard a lot of representatives say that unfortunately they might be shamed, they might be embarrassed, they might lose their job. And I'm okay with that. I've come to accept that may be what is all that is done. But at least the victims don't have to keep carrying that shame and that burden anymore. Let the perpetrators, let the co-conspirators, let them carry that. The children shouldn't have to anymore. It's not our burden. The adults knew. All the adults knew what was going on. The police knew. The FBI knew. Our government knew. So when you say about the survivors, when the public says or makes comments, well, you could have just left. Oh, yeah? The cops could have taken our complaints a little more seriously and followed up. The FBI could have taken our complaints a little more seriously and actually investigated and did their damn job. The DOJ could actually feel some remorse and guilt about the way they've handled this document and file release and actually decide to make a change today and do the right thing for survivors, for the children in this. The adults are still failing.
What is stopping the DOJ from just saying, damn, we messed up and we should have done this better. We're going to start doing it better today. That's the question we have to ask ourselves. There have to be people that are in the DOJ that want to do the right thing, but something is preventing them from doing the right thing. Not saying they all want to, but something is preventing those that do want to do the right thing. It's preventing them from doing it.
The country's failing. And until we start having those honest conversations, it won't change. It's hard to read those files and not be affected. You know? Like as a country. Like we all need therapy now after reading those files, if you want to be honest.
But as a survivor, it's got to be so difficult to know that nothing is really being done.
It is. It's terrifying because I look at my girl, my daughter, and she's 12. And I look at her every day and I'm like, God, I did not go through what I went through for her to go through it too. I am doing the best I can, co-parenting with my ex-husband, to make sure that I have a child that's very grounded and assertive and very well aware of the nature of what's out there without terrifying her, without pulling that light from her. That's hard to do as a parent. That's really hard to do. But when you see all these other countries opening investigations, countries that I went to, that I've done media with, are doing more for their constituents than my own government? It might take the United Nations to get involved. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up and say, those conspiracy theories that we were all laughing about 10 years ago, saying how crazy this can't be true. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would be at the center of it all, or a part of it, or attached to it. And I'm sure the other girls feel the same way. Jeffrey is a stain on all of our lives, including the government. That's blood on their hands. They have to make it right. And there are good people that are trying, but we need power, and there's power in numbers. So more people that join this fight, the better the result, the better the conclusion, and that's what we need.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for sticking around till the end, giving Haley your ear so you could hear her whole story. I want to let you know that the original interview is linked in the description of this video. You should go check it out and support that channel as well. And if you want to see other interviews with other Epstein survivors, this video right here has you covered. Thank you for watching. I'll see you over there.